Hey folks, this is Tolly and welcome to some more game dev. Back again this week. Today we're going to be looking at some stagger meter stuff. The main call out is last week we did miss our normal Sunday streams. I did not end up streaming because I was kind of down a bit of a rabbit hole paper prototyping some stuff. So we've been exploring the last few weeks trying to improve the enemy's behaviors. And before that, we were working on getting some item drop systems up and running so that we could have the enemies dropping some crystals that we could use as part of our upgrading tree system as like a currency required to unlock certain stat nodes. And all of this stuff has been around like trying to figure out like the flow and progression of the gameplay. Like what is it that the player is going to be doing in terms of combat and getting stronger. I have a fairly good idea of what narratively is going to happen, what cutscenes are going to happen, what areas of the map you're going to need to go to and explore, but when it comes to the combat stuff, I feel like I'm still not quite there. And a lot of what we've been doing with the enemy movement stuff has been trying to find ways of creating more variation in the combat system. So when I'm looking at this slime, this brown telegraphed crystal, which I think I turned into an arrow, which is not very clear, but we'll figure out the UI once we figure out if the mechanic is even working. But we know from this setup that we've been working on that this enemy is going to move, and it's going to move in 2 turns. And my attack slash takes 4 turns to activate. So if I perform slash, the enemy moves before we actually get a chance to hit them. And that'll be true not here, because here they're going to take 3 turns to attack, and then I know from building it, but the idea would be the player would learn this as they play, that the enemy is going to move again after this, but it'll take 2. So doing a bit of math, it'll be 5 turns before they move again. So I can get a slash in here. And this is kind of working. Like when I get into this situation, I know the enemy's about to move, so slash is going to work. I missed the first time. Hopefully I figure that out, and I can use bash in order to try and hit him. Even though the enemy is moving, bash is an AoE based ability, so I can see that it's going to hit in the area around the player even if the enemy does move. So by having this kind of movement behavior that we've been working on, it means that the AoE ability of bash is more useful to the player. Like you can't just hit slash over and over again, which is in playtesting what I was finding. Players would just hit slash over and over and over again. And this is making it so that there is a clear moment where you have to use bash, but it still feels almost too advanced for early in the game. I've been prototyping this, we've been building this up over the last few weekends, and last week I was playing it before stream, normal stream hours, and I just realized it's not working. Like, okay, maybe that's unfair. It's doing what I built it to do, which is forcing the player in certain situations to use bash because the enemy's going to move, so a single target attack in front of you at slash just isn't going to hit them. So I'm forcing the issue where the player literally has no other option but to use the AoE, which is finally creating variation, but it feels too punishing. And maybe when we are further into the game, we can have enemies with this type of movement, kind of, you know, dodging out of the way of your attacks and you needing to time things to be able to actually hit them, or even predicting where they're going to go and getting that aha moment of hitting them where they're going to be, not where they are. Like that all might work, but I think the player's toolkit and the abilities that they have available to them is going to need to be more advanced than just like a single target in front and an AoE kind of cleave. And so I want to try more things. I've been looking at other games for reference, and one of the big things is trying to build this kind of RPG with a single character is not super common, it feels like. There's a couple of examples out there that I know of, and I'm sure there's more that I'm unaware of, but the ones that I can draw on is like Final Fantasy 13-3 Lightning Returns, which is kind of like one character wearing a trench coat of 3 different characters. But regardless, it's like the examples I'm finding, like Lightning Returns, tends to have it so that when the player is in a combat situation, unlike older school RPGs where it's just hit one attack for each of your characters and each character tends to have a the right option they want to do. Your thief wants to steal, your cleric wants to heal, your fighter probably just wants to hit attack. With a single player game, because we only have the one character, it means that oftentimes I keep running into the situation where the only right move is to kind of do the same thing over and over again. And I want to create more variation than that. So one of the prototype things that we came up with, me and Drixie kind of worked out a bunch of different ideas, but the one we're going to work on today is trying to add like a stagger system and seeing if that helps or hurts the cause, because I'm not 100% sure, but it should be quick to prototype. So we're just going to build it and see if it creates the effect I want. And so let's jump in real quick and look at Balsamic for combat brainstorming. So what am I trying to achieve? So what am I trying to achieve here is primarily I want to have a variation of skills is optimal. It's a weird sentence, but that's what I want. I want to make it so that when the player is given a single screenshot of a moment of combat with the enemy going to be doing an attack, it's not always just hit A. I want to create a system where what you're doing is variable, and the optimal ability requires you to look at some amount of information on the gameplay or on the UI of the enemy and be able to go, oh, I need to do this in this situation. Vague, but that's the problem, is we don't fully know it, so we want to have a variation. I think we can accomplish this through a goal of like some sort of puzzle element in combat. I think if combat has puzzle elements, I think that will lead to a variation. So these two goals are kind of tied together, and I believe that my hope is that by having this goal, I will achieve this goal. Other kind of goals I want that are unrelated but also going to impact and restrict us is I want to have fast combat, and I want to have clear success moments. So the moment when the player succeeds in combat, I want to be very obvious. And then lastly, we have our skill tree system in which the player is able to go over to the skill tree. We're going to end up dying here, but that's fine. Oh no, we won by 1 health. When we go into the skill tree, right now I only have stat nodes. So I want to have more things that we can upgrade on an ability that is not just stats for your player, but things that actually affect this ability specifically. Like it has a power value that increases the power of this specific attack, whereas buying a stat node increases the player's attack overall, increasing their damage with all abilities. And like that's kind of like a good example of two types of nodes, power versus like stats, but like it's not enough. And as I'm trying to design these skill trees, I'm realizing there's just not enough variety in the types of nodes to keep it interesting. So we want to have whatever system we come up with that has this puzzle element and creating this variety of skills or skill usage. Maybe that's a better way to say this. I also want to make sure that the skill node system somehow benefits for whatever we're doing here. So however this puzzle works, there should be some node that we can get in the skill tree that makes the player better at this system. So our first stab at this, like I said, is going to be trying to add a stagger system. And I'm going to just jump in and we're going to start coding that. So we had a combo system originally, which is another one that me and Drixie talked a bit about, trying to figure out whether or not we could make something like that work again. But we ended up moving away from that for a couple of reasons, mostly revolving around the fact that it wasn't going to yield to enough skill node variation. We just weren't going to get more skill nodes out of like a combo system. There wasn't a lot of ways to augment that through upgrades. But we have this combo tracker, and I think we can kind of build the stagger meter on the back of this. And I kind of want to dig around here a little bit and try and figure out how was this working. So we had an ability effect called combo check ability effect, and this was grabbing the ability type component. So what type of ability is this? And from that, we were trying to determine from the tracker, from the defender, get its combo tracker and check to see if that type of ability was the next one in the combo list. Okay. So again, we're not going to use this verbatim, but I think this setup is similar to what we're going to want to do. We're going to want to have some way for us to grab the ability and see what type of stagger damage it does, how much, because each ability should have a different amount of stagger that it will do. And then we're going to want to grab some component off the defender, which is going to be tracking the enemy's progress towards being staggered. Okay, so if we look here, there's the combo tracker. Where on the ability did it have that ability type? Was that just at the root of it? Finding an ability, let's look at slash. Yeah, so it just had an ability type, which was low, medium, high, and this component just existed on every ability. So we could do it exactly the same way. I feel like there's another path we could take, though. As I'm looking into this, I feel like power, the thing we were talking about a moment ago in the skill tree, each ability has a power. There is a concept of ability improvements. And power can be upgraded by the ability spec. Okay, so there is a concept of a value that can be existing inside of the specific ability and then passed down to that ability's prefab and injected into it. So looks like it's coming from the design data. Just following the path here, seeing where this takes us. Yeah, so each ability has a power that comes in from the spreadsheet. So we could maybe piggyback off of this system, and I feel like this might be more closely related, actually. Like the combo checker is almost... It itself was a prototype, but I think we could even get off the ground more quickly using this. So if we were to add a new column, call this like stagger, and each ability, let's say slash has like a high amount of stagger. We'll say that it staggers for 40, and bash only staggers for like 20, and then we will leave these other ones as low, because I don't think you're staggering with a move. It's not really an attack, but we'll leave those values as something like 10, and then we'll download that into our TSV folder. Okay, so now that should be downloaded. We're going to double check in here real quick. We don't need all the art folders open right now, so we can minimize all those. Design data, TSV's abilities. Oh, I want to open VS Code. Okay. Cancel. What are you complaining about? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I'm seeing the stagger information here now. Now we're going to need to update our parser, specifically for infinite retries, and we're going to need to parse this information into our design data. I should probably give this a better name. Does stagger power make more sense? And then should this one eventually be renamed to like attack power? Let's go with stagger power. I want to move quick, break things today. I don't know if this is going to work, And so I don't want to build it perfectly, but I also don't want to build it in such a way that it's going to be a pain for me to fix it later. So for naming conventions, we'll just say stagger power is enough of a clarification. So that's good there. That should get imported into this data correctly. And then we inserted this before power in our spreadsheet. So this should be index 4 now, index 5, and then index 6. So that all looks fine. Now, where does this go? Let's follow the line, because this is going to make our lives easier if we can just follow power around, and whatever power does, we'll do the same thing for stagger power. So this is inside the ability spec, which is kind of like a backend for each ability that describes some like metadata about it. So we're going to add a stagger power concept here, and we'll transfer that. And then wherever power is used, interesting. So the ability improvements is a component that gets added to each ability when we instantiate it, and we pass along the information inside of the ability spec, which is kind of our backend meta information, and we pass that from the ability spec into this ability improvements component that gets added, or more accurately exists, on the ability. Okay, where else? Same idea. So there's two different functions for generating an ability, one for spawning the ability and one more specifically for spawning an ability after the player has already been loaded. So that should be fine. And then we use, okay, already caught that one. Then we have an ability improvement node, which can upgrade our power. This will probably need to be more specific in the future and actually decide which ability improvement stat we're modifying. For now, I don't need to worry about adding the skill node, like adding it to a tree. I will make a ability spec component for this though. Make sure I am renaming the correct one. Ability spec stagger power component. So this is a component that is used to display information on our UI. So just by doing this quickly, if we want to add this information somewhere, we should be able to do that really effectively now. Okay, so that exists. So we have the concept of power being passed into this level. Now from here, we want to continue to pass this along. And at this moment, when we perform an ability, we will want to update the property table to have stagger power added. Don't love that these names change. It goes from POW to power, but I'm going to keep the same naming convention. And again, we're moving quick and breaking stuff. So this exists. That should be all we need. So now we should be able to have ability effects that can grab a specific ability's power. So that's kind of the player side of it. So if we think about kind of what we're doing here, what did we do? We basically have the concept of the ability, and the ability has an ability spec, and we've added to each of these stagger power. And then even before this, technically we have ability design data. So we've basically added to the design data stagger power, we've added that to the ability spec, which then passes it down to the ability itself. And then at the moment that we perform an action, we could now create a stagger, apply stagger ability effect. And this would be able to get the stagger power of the ability and apply that to the enemy. So that's the next part of this. So we need to build this component. We don't have this yet. And we're also going to need to link this over to the enemy itself. So let's go back and think about that for a second. We had, for combo tracker, the idea of just a component on every enemy that kept track of the sequence of combos that you needed to perform in order to weaken and hurt the enemy. I wonder, again, I was thinking when I started the stream that I would use this as reference, but I think it might just be easier to use the stats system. Stats. Yeah, every enemy and every player has stats associated with them. And these have stat types, which is this list. So we could add stagger or max stagger. So that every enemy has these stats, and also the player would also have these stats. What impact is that going to have? Like, what do I need to do in order to make that happen? Do I need to initialize that? Is this going to completely break our save system? Like, I'm not entirely sure all the ramifications of modifying that enum. I guess we can just see. Again, work quick, break things. So if we modify the stats, I'm not seeing any errors. It's definitely imported everything. If we look at an enemy, we define some of the stats here. Yeah, and we just do set value. This might work. The thing I'm most concerned about is unit persistent data. This is a serializable class that outputs this list of stats. I don't think I use count anywhere currently, so I don't think this should break anything because we're adding the stats to the bottom, so it shouldn't cause any sorting issues. Okay, let's say that's good. We're going to initialize max stagger to 100. And we're going to do the same thing for the enemies, which we saw here. We will not let this be a definable stat yet for each enemy. We may eventually do that. I guess technically I also need to assign the current stagger amount to 0. I don't know whether or not the player, which is what this data is for, will be able to be staggered by enemies, but we'll set it all up to be usable by the enemies just in case I want to enable that functionality. Okay, so then what have we done? So we've added stats. So if we have the stats component, we've added stagger, added max stagger, and now we need to add to the enemy stagger stat. So this ability needs to add to this value. That should be pretty straightforward. Let's see if we can do that. So we'll go into our abilities again. We'll look at slash as an example. Inside of slash, actually, let's look at damage effect. This does the calculate. Here is where we apply damage. So we could do a apply stagger to this. Oh, this isn't even inside of damage. It's actually inside of hit that we care about. This is the most base level piece here. So this is calculating the damage. This is dealing with the miss. Here we're going to do apply stagger, and we're going to need a new ability effect. This will not be a damage effect. I feel like this naming convention for these folders is kind of broken a little bit. I could either make a new folder called like stagger effects, or I could add it somewhere else. I think right now, because these folders are getting a little muddy, I'm gonna just continue to add new folders because I think that's gonna be clearer in the long run for me. I'd rather look at a folder, have a bunch of folders, and have them named appropriately so that I can hopefully find what I'm looking for quickly, even if a lot of these folders only have one thing in it. Rather than being like, which folder is this in? Is it in combat? Is it in board? Is it in cutscenes? Where did I put this effect? All right, so apply stagger ability effect. Let's rename this stagger power, I believe is what we ended up calling this. See if I can go back and find it. Ability, stagger power, yeah. Okay, and then inside of here, this is grabbing the defender stats and adding a value to it. So I should just be able to do just rename a little bit, add to max stagger. Okay. And then we don't need this hit concept, I don't believe. So when we apply this, we are going to grab the defender stats and we're going to modify the stats with a stats sequence step. So this will happen in sequence at the exact moment in our kind of timeline system. Right after we apply damage, we will apply stagger. Oh, wait. No, sorry. I'm rereading. We don't want to be adding to the max stagger. We want to be adding to their current stagger amount. Okay. I think just like that, we've built this piece, and it is now effectively modifying the enemy's stagger value. So that's cool. But we're kind of going to need to do something when Stagger reaches max Stagger. So we need some other type of system. Stagger listener, controller, manager, tracker. So we're going to need something that's going to need to wait for Stagger to be greater than or equal to max Stagger. And then once that happens, apply Stagger status effect. That's going to continue. From there, that's going to go to some other stuff. Okay, I think this exists on the enemy. I think this is our equivalent to the combo tracker. Let's finish this thought though. So in hit effect, instead of this being apply damage, this will now be apply stagger. In theory, this should not need a customizable power. That may not be true. We might want to have other things modify. Yeah, we might want to have other things modify. Oh, I don't have my water. I'll be right back. And remember to unmute. All right, cool. So apply damage, apply stagger. So this should do something. Okay, edge cases. What happens if an ability doesn't have a stagger amount? Because if this is not here, if it doesn't find ability improvements on that ability, it would fail. So if we take a look at slash, do we have a concept of default power in here? I believe we do. We default a couple of other values at the beginning, but I thought... I guess not. I guess if power isn't there, I assume it'll return 0. What happens if it fails to find? Yeah, it just returns 0. Okay, so if something doesn't have an ability improvements, then stagger power will just be 0 in that situation. I guess the only situation where that would be true is in here for the AI. Like this must be setting a power value somewhere. Ah, this is where I'm doing it. Okay, so if it doesn't find a power amount, it sets it to 10 for normal damage power. Does that mean that if we look at AI Smash, does this one have... Yeah, this one has a power default. Okay, so if an ability wants to have increased stagger power and it is not a player-driven ability, we'll just need to set the property as part of the attack. Okay, this is fine. This is okay. Again, I don't think I want to focus on the enemy staggering the player right now. I want to focus on the player staggering the enemy as for the initial prototype, because we're mostly concerned about player actions when it comes to, you know, choosing between whether or not you want to deal damage or whether or not you want to try and push the enemy towards stagger, in which case you might do more damage, and then for the player to be able to make some like hopeful evaluations. Even if there's a optimal play pattern, I would hope that it's a pattern and not just hit one button if I'm doing this right. So again, I'm not sure if it's going to work, but we're going to prototype it. So I can't think of any issues where this would be, I can't think of any edge cases offhand. So we're going to take a look at slime. All of these should be based off of one variant. And I'm going to need to make that change at some point. Yeah, I think all of these should have been variants of 3D enemy container, but I instead copied each one, which means they now each have unique values. I don't feel like touching that right now. I feel like I want to instead just make it work with one of the slimes. Maybe we make it work with the boar, because the boar will be the bigger enemy that I'm most concerned about you having like some sort of like longer battle with. I want battles to be quick, but if we add a stagger system, by its very nature, we will be extending the experience, because it won't just be hit them 3 times and they die. Ideally, it's like hit them 5 times and they die, but with like some ordering of your attacks to stagger them and then get them into a weakened state and then finish them. Okay, so I'm going to modify the boar and only the boar. And we're going to create a new component, which is going to be Stagger Tracker. Yeah, okay. Cool. So then from here, we're going to want to track the modification of that value, which is not going to be done the way we did for combos, but we should probably look at health or some other RPG element. That was RPG elements specific to infinite retries. I want to look at RPG elements that are generic. Because, like, I think this works similar to when an enemy gets knocked out. Because we have a class that tracks the current HP and max HP of an enemy, and it observes when it will change and when it did change. On HP will change, it clamps the value to max HP. Yeah, we're going to want to do something like that. And then there's a little bit of logic for if the max HP changes, which, okay, interesting. I don't know if I want to change max stagger amount, but maybe that could be an interesting thing to play with. So then how do we... Oh no, I'm wrong. We do not track knocked out via that system. We actually track it via a stat comparison condition. Here. Yeah, we have an auto status controller. Does each enemy by default have an auto status controller? Not by default, but it's possible it's added somewhere in script. It's not referenced anywhere. Problem is, some of this is older project stuff. We're looking for how infinite retries specifically handles this. That doesn't make any sense. We definitely add stats first. So HP should be equal to whatever the initial amount of HP they have is. If status equals 0. If stats equal 0. Huh. I feel like the way this is set up, we should never be adding this component. We must be using the auto status controller somewhere. I'm just not seeing it. Let's run the game and see if this controller is used anywhere. Like maybe it's on a global pattern somewhere. Yeah, it's just a global manager. I think this is just code that never executes. Unless somehow an enemy loads and it's already dead. Which I don't... Was that a thing we could do in Era of Embers? Is this like carryover dead code? Oh, you know what? I think it might be. That's a little weird, but I feel like there's a situation where I may have created units that are supposed to be knocked out to begin with. Weird. Okay. Okay, I'm going to leave it alone. But this is odd. I think the way that normally an enemy dies is through this system, though, which is just listening for any stat changes on HP from any unit. And if any of those stat changes change the HP to be 0, we apply the knocked out status effect to that character with the condition that its HP needs to remain 0. I believe if the HP value changes... Yeah, if the stat changes and the condition is no longer met, then we remove the condition automatically. Okay. So I believe we can just piggyback onto this then. We just need to check if Stagger status has changed. Same concept here, and then we're going to grab this function, and instead of checking HP, this is going to check to see if Stagger equals that unit's specifically max Stagger value. And if it does, we're not applying the knocked out status effect. We'll need to apply a staggered? Because we had disarm and stun and other things like that. I think rather than reuse one of those, I am just going to create a new one wholesale today so that we don't get any kind of old artifacting logic from some of those pre-existing status conditions. So So we're going to make this stagger status effect. Now, knocked out is maybe a bad example because it does a lot of work. We might want to steal some of this. Yeah, a lot of these status effects are applying basically UI elements to notify you. And applying animations. And then some additional kind of interfacey type stuff that we use for getting information about status effects. Okay, I think I do want to use stun as the base, because they're going to be very similar. And I think we may get some free logic from this, while hopefully not getting too much carryover. I'm not sure. Okay, let's see where this is referenced. Who uses this currently? The foe attack state checks to see if it's stunned. And if it's stunned, it goes into the gray telegraph crystal. And then the AI director is also checking to see if it's stunned. And if it is stunned, it won't do any of its planning. Okay. Okay, I think that's fine. I need a second to think. I'm currently standing. I'm going to move the desk to a sitting position, which will give me a moment to think here. So I will be right back. And remember to unmute. Okay, cool. So let's think. Okay, or let's talk about it. So I think I do actually want to take all of the logic for stun, and I want to steal that for myself for this new stagger. But I don't want to just apply stun, I don't think, because I want the stagger effect to have other impacts that stun currently doesn't do. So I do want to make it separate. So we're gonna copy in, we've copied all the information from stun into stagger. It's going to do all the same stuff with the unit component stuff. It's going to apply the same animation if it has a stun animation, which I don't think it does, but that's fine. Yeah, I'm not sure if some of this code is even functional at this point, but we're gonna move forward. We're gonna change the name of it, which I don't believe is used in any kind of checking. It's only used to display. Yes, it's used to decide which icon to show. So I'm going to leave it as stun. It's fine. It's fine. I have a feeling I'm going to regret this choice, but we're going to make it so this is stagger effect. It's going to be identical to stun. And then everywhere where we are doing a check for the stunned status effect, we're also going to need to check if it is staggered, because it should have the same impacts on the This doesn't work. Reading the code explains the code. I think long-term status effects should have some sort of interfaced value for whether or not they block the enemy from being able to take actions. But again, we're prototyping. Try not to think about how this is broken and just keep building until you have something that's functional, and then we can find out whether or not it's even fun. Okay. So if it has a stun status effect or a stagger status effect, it is stunned. And then if it has a stunned status effect or a staggered status effect, it is also stunned. Okay, so they will be treated the same way. They have the same information and will show the same icons. So now when we stagger a enemy, it should lose its action and count down its CT for however long the attack system said to do so. Currently, that is 1 turn. Amorphous with the 10 gifted subs for a total of 45 over the entirety. I hope you are doing well, Amorphous. You have started a hype train. Very cool. All right. Okay, so we have this setup. Let's go back to our balsamic. So we've added stagger power to our design data. We've added stagger power to our ability spec. We've added stagger power to the ability, and then the ability effect checks that staggered power and tries to add that number to the enemy's stagger stat. And then we didn't end up needing a stack tracker because we kind of just use the stat systems and we can just auto apply a status effect. So we added a auto status controller. Is now applying. I love that they're still just going. It's still just, there's still just sub notifications. Man, that is awesome. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. So we've added to the auto status controller that just like globally exists that says when let's reverse this because it'll make more sense to me. If the stagger amount equals max stagger, then add stagger status. And then the stagger status is basically just a copy of the stun status we already had, which we're going to augment it. But essentially, baseline, same as existing stun. Okay. Cool. Let's get some UI here, because I think this should be working at this point. We should be able to see the stagger amount going up, and we should be able to see the enemy get staggered once they hit max. So I want to go into the status component for the enemy. Which I do not remember what that's called. Let's go to the UI scene. Combat UI, combat UI pools, status component, simple status component. This is the one that the enemy is currently using. And we're going to want to add another health bar in here. And this will be a stagger bar, which might get a bit muddy. But again, we're moving quick, we're prototyping, we're breaking things. So this will be a stagger bar. And this will be the fade stagger bar. Oh, is this the bug? I've noticed that the health bar extends too far, and I think it's because I never modified this one. Okay, cool. So now this whole thing, I'm going to just shift down 5 pixels. I think I want this thing to be less intrusive than the health bar. The health bar should feel larger. So we're going to go to our image here. We're going to bring that into a sprite, which we need to open up. Okay, and then we're going to come in here, and instead of having 2 pixels of room, we're going to shrink that down to only 1 pixel, and then bring the canvas in 1. Cool, so now it'll only be 1 pixel wide. And the hype train has unlocked a new emote. Very fun. I think, you know what? I might even be able to do... that? Because this is going to be connected to the one above it. So if I save this out as a new bar... stagger fill bar, and then we go into here and we modify this to use that new stagger fill bar, make this 3 high, change this one to be only 1 high, and 0.5 position. That looks right. We'll need to do the same thing here, 0.5. That should all position correctly. It looks weird because it doesn't have a proper canvas. And then we want to change the color of this, I think. This is currently green. I, for the sake of my sanity, am just going to take this and save it out as pure white. and then I will modify the color in engine, I think. So then instead of enemy green, we should have a white enemy fill bar now. Did I modify the other one by mistake as well? I did accidentally save over the green one. I'll leave the green alone. Okay. And then for this one, let's see. For Stagger, let's do some sort of orangey color. We probably honestly want the color to change as the bar fills also, but I'll get to that when I get to that. Now this fills this way. So then the only other thing we need to do in order for this to function is we're going to just need to set up a new status or a stat condition. Oh, which one do we want? Stat fade bar? No, we don't want the fade. Fill component. Stat percent fill component. This is what we use. And we're going to fill this bar based off of stagger min stat to max stat of max stagger. Oh, I missed your message, Amorphous, from a couple minutes ago, but if you're still here, it doesn't look like you are, but I hope you have a good day at work. I'm sure the stream will go swimmingly. What could possibly go wrong? So this one here is this bar, and then invert. What is invert? This is 0 right now. I'm assuming that that's a -1 is what I built. Set to 1 to invert. Okay. I hate that. That should just be a bool, but I see I added a tooltip at least for myself. And I do want to invert this one because we want to we want to increase this one, not deplete. I think. Yeah. As the value gets closer to 100. Actually, no, actually we want this to be regular. Because if you have 0 stagger, yeah, this one will go up. So we don't want to invert it. This one will go down. Yeah, no, it'll just naturally be inverted because it goes positive instead of negative. We're adding to it. Okay. Stagger. Status, stagger, status, stagger. I guess the other thing I want to double check sorry, okay, I figured it out. I'm like, there's something that is gnawing at me a little bit. When we made this stagger apply, we did it exactly like how we apply damage. We just add amount. How come the damage one reduces? We're not flipping it, so this value must just be a negative integer when it comes in. I'm going to check the... There should be a calculate. No. It's this one, I think. It's not called calculate because it was the... Yes, okay, this outputs a negative number. Cool. So, because we're not doing that same setup, Stagger will add... Yeah, okay, everything's fine. I was just confused because they were both doing the add operation, and I didn't modify this. I know I hadn't modified it, so I was just confused on why damage worked, because it felt like one of them should be flipped, but the flip is happening on the damage sooner. Anyway, it's fine. It works. I think it's going to be okay. So this bar will go down, as it's always done, and this bar should increase as we apply Stagger to the enemy. I think that's it. The only other thing we're not doing is we're not applying this fade bar, which the fade bar... This status change fade bar... What do you do? You're applying a little sequence that enables the fade bar and then fades it away. Yeah, because we want to show the amount of damage you did with the attack as like a section of red that then like fades off. But in this situation, we're not... I feel like it's weirder to see this like fade bar appear and then fade away and show the orange underneath. Because it's not going to be fading to the empty background, it's going to be fading to the new fill. Yeah, okay, I don't think I want to use this fade. I might want to come up with a new UI component, but for now we're just going to have it snap. Let's test it. I think we've done enough coding. It's been an hour. I think everything should work. I'm excited to see how I messed it up. But ideally, if we walk up and hit slash, the little bar underneath them should fill. And it should work on any enemy, because we didn't end up needing to build a specific tracker. It did not do anything. Okay. That implies that we did not apply any stagger. So let's start there. Apply stagger ability effect. Let's take a look at this part of the code and see if we're actually even hitting that. Let's give this a shot. Okay. Hit the enemy. It's doing some existing debugs, but that's fine. Amount is 0, so it did not get an ability improvement on that. Okay, so it's going to go back further. So it is applying this effect, but it's finding that stagger power was nothing. So the next layer that we need to check is the actual ability. So the ability class is trying to apply that information here. If it finds an ability improvement component, which I guess we never checked to see if slash has one, but I'd be surprised considering we have the power system. I would have thought it would exist. It does exist, and it's finding that the ability improvement value is 0. Okay, so we're going to go back from here. So this is supposed to be coming from the ability spec, and the ability spec is supposed to have this set from the design data. Okay. So we'll add a couple of breakpoints, but before that, we're even going to go one step further back, and we're going to check to make sure the design data... I never imported, I bet. I bet you I modified the code to import the TSV into our JSON, but we never actually ran that script. So in here, this does not have a stagger power. Right, okay, so we missed a import step. So if we come in here, go to IT, parsers, ability parser, this will parse our TSV and then bring it into the JSON, and now it has a stagger power, except It's 0 for most of those. Okay, slash now has 40, bash has 20, shoot has 10. Okay, cool. Now the data is actually populated. It looked like from what we saw, all the other breakpoints were also leading to the code working, just not having anything set up in them. Didn't mean to do that. Okay, cool. So let's try walking up and hitting it now. We're going to zoom back in. Hit. And the stagger meter fills. Okay. So then stagger meter fills some more. The problem is we are killing the enemy before the stagger meter fills all the way. That is a design problem. Easy fix. We're going to hard edit this just to test. We'll go into slash and we'll give it 100 so that one hit with slash should put it to max stagger immediately. I'm also curious because this is also going to start combat. So this is ripe for some sort of edge case. That killed the enemy. I'm going to assume that we didn't change auto status controller to actually use the stagger status effect that we built. Okay, so a little bit of setting things up and not trailing backwards to actually hook them up, but otherwise working okay. Cool. So that is kind of working as intended, just a little bit odd. So nothing is removing the stagger status effect. Because we did this, where the auto status controller adds it, and we made it so the stagger status effect is baseline doing a stun effect. So the enemy is stunned here. But because nothing ever ends, we never actually remove, like, we're not actually tracking a number of turns before removing it. Okay. So that's fair. Instead of a stat comparison condition, what if we did a duration status condition? Where's an example of one of these? Looks like we manually modify the condition normally. Lame, but fine. Prefer if we had an init call. So now this should auto remove the status after one turn. I think this won't quite work as we intend still. Because I don't think it's catching the stun at the right moment. This is kind of an edge case moment. But yeah, the enemy is currently in the move. Okay, couple of problems. That's less of a problem. I'm not concerned about that right now. The problem I am concerned about is it looks like the moment we stun and apply the status effect, the enemy is already chosen that it wants to do a move. and it doesn't reevaluate that plan and realize that it's been stunned. So we come back over here. So it has the stun status effect. It says it's stunned currently. But yeah, it won't stop it. We would need it to have at least a duration of 3 in order for it to catch the fact that it's stunned when it actually tries to perform the attack. But this is really not the functionality we want. We want to have it so that if the enemy becomes staggered or stunned, they immediately drop their current plan and go to a new plan, which is to do nothing, basically. Okay. So let's see if we can figure out how to do that. It's working, though. I should take a moment and celebrate the fact that everything we just wrote, like, this is now functioning with a couple of missteps along the way. Not too bad. And using a lot of our existing systems, mostly the stats system, we're able to fairly easily add the new stats effect. So the problem we're going to look at is in the attack state. In this attack state, we normally check on our next attack at one specific moment here. And it doesn't look like we reevaluate on update. Yeah, so when we minus 1 CT here, we should really decide on a new attack. Can I just call this function? Would that just work? Looks like it should. I don't fully understand the ramifications of all of these conditionals, but let's just say if we're stunned when we go to update, we decide on a new attack. And that should in turn hopefully change the current plan to be stunned. I saw it for a moment. Okay, so there's still a bit of a race condition happening. Where do we modify this? This is all UI stuff. So the only times we're modifying this is here and here. And I definitely am seeing like a frame where it is gray and then it changes to brown. So that means that it is applying the stun status effect. It is catching that and changing the next ability to be the gray crystal, saying that it is stunned, and then it is updating it the next frame to instead be start over one more time. It's definitely, oh sorry, someone called me out on this in a previous stream. I think I called this a race condition, but technically that's not actually what's happening. But it's just my code is not executing in the order that I would like, which is not a race condition, but my brain autopilots to that because I am silly. All right, cool. Let's put these back in here. We'll get rid of all the other breakpoints. And now, hopefully, we can see what's happening. So we hit the enemy. It applies stagger up to 100. At this point, I'm going to guess we have not added the stagger status effect. We have not. So we're going to look at the auto controller. So this is going to hit this in a second here. Yeah, and then it's applying this status, but at this point we've already decided on what the enemy's doing. And it is showing like the UI is updating correctly, but the plan isn't, because the plan has already been set. So we see that the enemy is showing the stunned status effect symbol, but it has already come up with the plan. So where we need to check the call stack and see when this is happening. Come into here, hit the enemy. Where is this being called from? Oh, I see. We update the state of the enemy when hit by enemy is called. And hit by enemy is being called here as part of the applied damage. Okay, so that's a pretty easy change in the logic then. We just need to go into the hit effect prefab and reorder these so that stagger gets applied before damage. Oh, that's going to have other ramifications though, because eventually I'm going to want to make it so the staggered status effect increases damage. Oh no, that's fine actually, because we calculate damage and apply damage are two different things. So we can calculate damage without the stagger status effect being applied, apply the status effect, then apply the damage. That's cool. Okay, so no, we'll be fine. So this ordering should be okay. So now we're going to add the status effect first, then come in here and see that we are stunned. Yeah, and now it is stunned. And weirdly, is going to remain stunned not for 1 turn, but for 3, because that's what we set the duration to. I should figure out what's going on with that design data issue, but I'm going to leave it alone for now. Yeah, so we're coming in here, we're applying it and saying it has a duration of 3 turns. I'm going to check, when does this actually get updated? Here. So it actually applies the negative condition on the same turn, or sorry, negative duration. It minuses the duration of that status effect. So it's technically got 2 turns left. It's showing 1. It's minusing it. We minus it here. The enemy is still deciding to do nothing. And then here is when it actually should be 0, and it'll get removed, at which point the enemy chooses its next ability. Okay. This all seems fine. The main thing is that this is being hard-coded to 1, but it should probably actually be based off of the duration of the status effect. I'm just not sure if I can get that from here. Is this only used in one spot? It's used in 2 spots. Right here where we decide to do next. Okay. So then can I do... get stun length? And then this will be an integer that it'll return. That value will go here. We'll store it. Actually, we can just do this into this. Length doesn't look right. How did I spell that wrong? Why is my brain... Because I've mixed up the TH and somehow couldn't see it. All right. So then in here, if stun status effect, we're going to just return 1. If stagger status effect, we somehow need to find out what its duration is. And here we will just return 1 by default. I guess it's 0 in this situation. You shouldn't be able to get inside here if you didn't find one of these, but that's fine. This is a mono behavior. Interesting. Unlockable characters with the hydration redeemed. Appreciate it. And remembering to unmute. All right. All right. What do I do here? I think we should just be able to do get component and just find a duration status effect. It should be on the same object. I suppose I could be safe and actually validate that it exists. Fix up my brackets. Okay. And I think that should get us the stun length. Yeah. Okay. Let's give that a shot. So now it should show the gray telegraph crystal and have a value for its CT equal to the duration. It might need to be 1 minus what it is because we are reducing it immediately. It is 0. That's wrong. Okay, so it did not find the duration status condition then. So let's do a quick search for that component. Find in scene. Where is it? Is it on an object below it or something? Ah, it is not applied to it directly. It is applied as a game object below. All right, get component in children then. And because I'm checking references here, it is not referenced by the condition itself. And this is a type of status condition. Is this referenced by the status effect in some way? This is how we add them. This is how we remove them. In theory, we could use this status class to somehow, like, handle some of this logic for us. Yeah, it's kind of already doing that, though. It's doing it the same way. How does parry work? Weird. Sorry, just kind of rabbit holing a little bit here, but I feel like it's a little odd that I'm not seeing a way that this actually removes itself. It's a status condition. It does have a remove call, which only happens on duration and on status compare. It's not used anywhere else. I think parry status effect gets applied this is actually added on. Oh, this is on the NPC. Oh, right. This was a hack I added. I made it so that the NPCs are always parrying constantly for our cutscene. Okay, never mind. Sorry. Weird rabbit hole. I just was curious on what was going on there. Cool. So we should now be able to get the duration, because we know that the duration status condition is not on the same object, but an object below it on one of its children. So then if we walk up to this slime and hit it, yeah, so we see a CT of 3, which is technically incorrect. Disable. Okay, getting rid of some of the breakpoints so we can see this more easily. But what's going to happen is going to update to 3, and then when we skip a turn, it's going to go to 1. Because technically the duration is 3, but we minus from the... We update the conditions at the end of the round after the condition got applied, so it goes from 3 immediately to 2, but the planning for the next turn has already happened, and it only saw it as 3, and it doesn't get the update. But then as soon as we skip a turn, it does reapply it, because we're still stunned, and now it updates to the correct number. Alright, again, we're kind of prototyping here. I'm just going to simply modify it here so that when it gets the duration amount, it minuses it by 1, because we know that it's going to get reduced by 1 in a second when the turn ends. This also means that anytime we want to decide on a duration of a status effect, because it gets minused on the turn it happens, it always needs to be 1 higher than the actual number of turns I want it to last. Yeah, I think I've run into this before. It's fine. It's not ideal, but it's fine. I suppose there could be some sort of system I can put into place to check whether or not it's a newly created status effect for this turn. Still happening, kind of. Huh. We also want to have some sort of system that is going to fix up our stagger amount. So when we remove the status effect for stagger, is there some sort of call that we get? Is there a callback There is a on disable. I'm guessing this is where we remove it. We can try here so that we can do a stats dot. It's not dot, it's going to be status type, stats type is equal to 0. So when we remove the stagger status effect, we reset the stagger amount back to 0 so that you can refill the bar again and reapply the status effect. Okay, yep. Okay, so we can reapply it. Another bug. Yeah, there's some weird bugs with like timing some of this stuff, which I'm not thrilled about. The like way that it's updating is just not accurate. And it's because we're trying to intercept the status effect and then update the plan of action for that enemy, and then we show the current plan, not its current status information. And because of that like one layer of abstraction between the two, it means sometimes they get out of sync. Yeah, the fact that that went from 2 to 0 is also really confusing to me. Oh, it's because it follows. Yeah. We're constantly updating that CT amount and planning a new... Yeah, so we need to only do this initially. Oh, this is... So what's happening is because we set up this logic to say if we're stunned, redecide on our next attack again, it's redeciding to show the telegraph crystal, the gray one, and then updating the CT amount with the stun length, and then doing -1, but now the stun length duration is actually correct, and we're minusing it by 1 when we shouldn't be. It should show the actual value. I guess, again, kind of hacky, but I guess the next step would be to check if we've already decided on a gray telegraph crystal, aka the plan of attack is null, and if so, don't do it again. Yeah, so I guess if... I don't think this is going to work. I feel like there's other edge cases, but we can say if we're stunned and the telegraphed plan does not equal null, decide on the next attack. So this should cover applying the stun only on the first turn when it happens, and then once we're showing that gray telegraph crystal, we shouldn't re-show it again. This is probably fine. As long as we don't have multiple ways of staggering the enemy, I think this should be okay. And again, we're prototyping. I'm going to keep repeating it to myself because I need to hear it. But we are not doing this perfectly. We are just trying to test the functionality and see if it's fun. So that did completely break it. So now it is constantly deciding on its next attack way too early. Did I flip the logic? I feel like I flipped the logic. If stunned and telegraph crystal does not equal null. I don't think it was an or. I think it was an and. That should fix it. Cool. All right, so now we have set up a meter. We have a stat internally for the enemy. It is updating that meter based off of the power, the stagger power of each individual ability. If that meter gets all the way to 100, which right now for testing purposes Slash does 100 stagger, the enemy becomes staggered. The counter is now counting down correctly, and once the counter is finished counting down, they decide on their next actual action. So in this situation, it should not be showing the yellow one, it should be showing the gray one. And it should show 2, not 1, because we've interrupted this action. The following turn it updates correctly and goes to 1, but I'm not thrilled that this then goes to 0. This should have then chosen its next ability, and it should be 5 yellow. So there's still some sort of issue fundamentally. So let's start with looking at what's going on at the moment of application. So I believe we should be hitting here in the code. So if we hit slash, interesting. We did not hit this breakpoint. Now, if I skip forward one more, we do. Okay. Where does this internal update get called? Inside of the turn-based state, which updates the current state right from the turn-based. And this happens inside the AI director. So when we start the turn, we update the plan for the AI. So at the moment when we hit the enemy, it has already done this. And the reason it works on the initial hit of the enemy is because technically the AI hasn't taken a turn yet, and we are alerting it. That's what we saw with somewhere where we had a bug a moment ago. The patrol, I believe, hit by enemy. We call hit by enemy as part of damaging it, which changes it to the attack state from the patrol state or the idle state, essentially. And when we first enter the attack state, one of the first things we do on enter is decide on our next attack, which we will see that we are stunned. But if the enemy is already active and in combat, and we hit them, and we cause them to become stunned, by that point, we've already called the internal update, and so the enemy has already decided on its action and is not going to re-decide on that action. Okay. Do we need to be more direct here? What are the negative ramifications of making it so that the status effect triggers an internal update of that enemy? Because right now I said this happens as part of the AI director. When we do next, we call faux update current state. If we do this manually, it will update the CT of the current active plan. Oh, this part here might be part of the other bugs we're seeing, but we'll get to that. But yeah, if we call internal update, I think that is the incorrect call to be making. I think we might be able to directly tell it to decide on its next attack. This is a private function, but similar to how we change to the faux attack state when they are hit, I wonder if we can do something similar where we alert the enemy that it should validate whether or not it's been stunned. Yeah, it's not internal update that we care about though. And these turn-based states don't have any other concept or way of updating them. Okay. Do we have any way of checking what state we're currently in? This is all AI logic for how it actually decides on what action to take. That's all fine. So we can get this information. This is important. We can grab this, and we can for sure add this to the Stagger, which was originally here, and we deleted it because I didn't think I needed it. Stagger applied. Okay, let's say that when we apply Stagger, we do that. I think there's ways that we could even check to see that the stat has been changed in some ways, but let's just use the existing system we already have here. This is a little hard-codey, but again, we're prototyping, it's fine. So instead of calling change state, I think I want to instead alert the current state somehow. This is a way of getting information out about the current state. I guess we could change states. I don't like that either, though. Getting into here is very encapsulated, but it was built that way on purpose. I don't want to be having outside things manipulating this directly. And I don't think I want to be calling internal. I don't like it. but I'm going to try just calling update current state. No, that's not going to work. I want it to work, but it's not. Because if the enemy isn't actually staggered, hasn't actually been stunned, we're going to update the amount of time until its next action every time we do this. So we're going to, every time we hit the enemy, we're going to like advance its timer by 1, which is an interesting mechanic, but not what we want by base. Like that's, I want to be able to control that. What can I do with the current state? Like at this level, what information do we even have that is accessible? Enter, update, internal update. What is the difference between update and internal? Oh, just one is incrementing the number of turns in that state, which I don't even think I'm using right now for much, but may eventually. Yeah, otherwise we don't have anything else we can do with it. We could cast it to a faux state, which is a more specific version, which allows us to get access to some other variables, but again, it's only getting information about that state, not modifying that state. I could kick us out of the attack state and put us into a like validate stagger state that just immediately goes back into the attack state. That feels awful. This is the first time in a while that I feel like I've hit like an actual brick wall, where like I don't see a path in our system to be able to do what I'm trying to do. Hydration from unlockable characters. Appreciate the redeem. Realistically, we're at or close to at time for stream. For anyone new here, we stream for 2 hours from 2 to 4 PST, or I guess it's PDT now because we're in daylight time, but anyways, Pacific time. And then I take a break for 2 hours for dinner, and then I come back at 6, and we're just about at that time where I'm going to take that break. So I suppose I could try and think about a solution over dinner, which is usually quite helpful. Taking a step away, eating, usually I get some amazing idea. Yeah, that's probably what we're going to need to do. I think the honest answer is we probably want to create some sort of virtual function that is like a external update that we can add to the states. And most of those states won't override it, but the attack state will, and that'll give us some way of like intercepting or asking it to update what its next attack is at the moment when stagger is applied. That's probably the easiest solution and what I'll go with. Yeah. And then once we have that, what is it complaining about? I just want to quickly show this. It is complaining because I didn't save this class. No, it's complaining because I left this in a bad state. Okay. But once I have the ability to ask it to update its plan of attack at the moment that we apply stagger, we should be able to see the enemy's attack be interrupted properly. So if they are going to do their attack, it'll update this to like a gray with 2. And then sorry, I see what the other bug is. The reason that it stays on gray for 1 extra turn is because it is applying this with 0. So we need to make sure that the stun length is greater than 0. Okay, and I think that'll fix most of the issues. It's really just getting it to update immediately, which is the last problem we'll have to solve. Just going to disable all the breakpoints. Yeah, so now we should be able to hit it. It goes stunned. That is updating correctly. And then at 1, it updates to this one, which is what we want to see. Here it's 1, and then it updates. Okay, yeah. So just adding a validation to make sure that the stun count is not greater than... or making sure the stun count is greater than 0. Oh, I can't spawn another one. Well, that's weird. Oh, can I not do any interactables? Oh, what kind of state did I get myself into? No, these work. It's just not these ones. Is that because of this ability bug? Alright. I will fix that off camera in between streams as well. Cool. So that's where we're going to call it here. I'm going to go get some lunch or dinner, whatever. I'm going to get some food. And then we will be back in 2 hours. We will continue setting this up. I think we're most of the way there. We essentially have the stagger set up. The main thing we want to do now is essentially add extra logic so that you deal increased damage to staggered enemies. And we want to play with some of the numbers. Right now we have slash set to be a stagger power of 100, so it's immediately staggering the enemy. I want to try setting that to something like 40, and then play with the damage numbers and health values a little bit to see if we can get into a situation where you can actually stagger an enemy after a couple of hits and, you know, not having them die immediately. We just need to make them a little tankier so that the mechanics work. But yeah, so a little bit of design tuning and a little bit more coding, but I think we're most of the way there. But we'll be back in 2 hours. For now, though, this will be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.